80%. What does this number represent in practice? You might not believe it, but this number represents the amount of digital transformation projects that fail around the world. Yes, you heard right. It's a very high number, isn't it? And one can wonder, but if so many projects fail, what is the root of the problem? And I have witnessed several digital projects in my experience. And what I can say is that whenever I came on board to pick up the pieces, the most important issue that was at stake was always the lack of stakeholder acceptance and the people who are committed to implement that digital project. And that is purely the reason why I have embarked on a mission to what I call the humanization of technology. This is a concept which I can elaborate further in other areas, but today I want to create the link between the technology and the business where the technology is actually going to be implemented in practice. My name is David Galia, and today I'm going to take you through a journey for giving you some tips to implement a successful digital transformation project. I'm also the author of a book which is called Digital Made Simple, which will be launched in February 2023. Because digital in practice is really very simple. It is not a complex process, but it is not easy. And the fact that it is hard plays in your favor. Why? Because if it was an easy process, then everyone would implement a successful digital transformation and everyone will be on the same level playing field. So by following some certain tips, you can overcome the difficulties to implement a digital transformation project and create performance outcomes which put you on a competitive advantage in comparison to your competition. So please stay tuned to listen to some basic tips that I can give you from my experience on how to successfully manage these projects. But first, let me start off by recounting a very simple story. It is a story about a client. It was one of my clients who was in the insurance sector. And what we've done was that this particular client wanted to recode a system, an information management system on the insurance operations to make it more modern and to make it more attuned to the environment in which he was operating. So this client approached me and he asked me, David, listen, can you help me out to basically implement this new system? We were thinking because the system that the insurance company was operating at that point in time was a DOS-based solution. And he was encouraged to take on board an Oracle-based solution. And my initial reaction, I told him, yes, of course, I can help you to implement the system. But why on earth do you want to recode the system and make it perform exactly in the same way as it's doing today? And he said, but we are quite comfortable with our systems today and how they are working, and we are quite happy with the operations. But when you look at the operating model of this insurance company, there was so much more that this insurance company could achieve. And I can give you an example. For example, this insurance company was focused primarily on products. So it has separate lines. It had a line for motor insurance, for health insurance, for life insurance, and for business insurance, and so on and so forth. But it lacked one fundamental aspect. That was the customer journey and the customer experience. So in my view, I thought that the insurance company could reorganize its operations and transform and make a paradigm shift from a product orientation to a client orientation. And this is in fact what we've done. We looked at the whole business operating model. We identified how this business operating model could in fact, in practice, be changed over. And in so doing, we implemented an Oracle-based solution which took into account the customer journey. So now the insurance company was segmented on the basis of customers. So you had the customer line, which was the personal line, the business line, the SME line, and the corporate line. which took into account all the different needs of the separate business units which they were operating. This is a very long story, and it involved a major changeover. It required a cultural shift of the organization, and it involved extensive training of the people on the ground. But the story here is very important. Why? Because the message is that it takes much more than technology in practice to generate a successful digital transformation process. But let's move on and look at what makes a successful transformation journey, at least from my point of view. And in my book, Digital Made Simple, I segment the process into three main areas. So we've got the first area, which is the central theme, is what I call digital mindfulness. Now, what is digital mindfulness? If you look at definitions of digital mindfulness, most cases you find that it is related to individuals and their well-being in an organization and how they use technology. In my case, I have adapted this definition to include how close and how effective is the organization in being sensitized to the environment around it and being responsive to its change. So this is a very important definition. I will go into more detail in the next slides. But once you understand where you are and how the environment around you is changing, you need to develop a digital strategy. But the digital strategy needs to be agile enough to respond to the changes in the external environment. So this is a vitally important component, which unfortunately I've seen many organizations completely ignore this fact. And this is fundamental. Why? Because we know that the environment in practice changes all the time, and in so doing, your digital strategy may become incompatible to your competitive environment around you. So you need to be nimble, and you need to have the right structure, systems, and processes to make that changes as are necessary. But the final component, which is often overlooked, is what I call balanced leadership. We have heard many times what are the main components of a successful digital transformation project. And I'm sure you have heard about the three elements, which are people, process, and technology. But what most companies and what most consultants don't tell you is that the most important aspect about these three elements is not having the best people, the best technology, the best processes, but it is about having the right people, the right technology, and the right processes that are in sync across each other. And this is a very important concept, which I shall be delving into later on. Digital mindfulness. What is digital mindfulness about? And as I said, there are two components. The first component is about understanding technological chaos around us and how this could be exploited to your advantage. Many organizations and many managers like routine and thrive on routine. Why? Because routine is about operating in a stable environment. It is about learning from your past mistakes and perfecting your standardized processes and systems to that particular environment. And that makes a good manager. Why? Because a good manager is efficient. He removes and avoids waste in the process and makes sure that the technology is working in an appropriate manner. However, the greatest leaders of all time thrive on change. When there is a disruption in the changes in the environment in which they are operating, and they are adapting their operating procedures to that particular environment. And technological chaos puts organizations, especially small ones, at an advantage. Let's not call it an advantage. Let's call it at least a level playing field. Why? Because large organizations in practice have an unfair advantage in a stable environment because they would have perfected their business processes over time, whereas SMEs and small business would not have had that right mix of time and economies of scale to stabilize their business processes. But in a case of where there is chaos, the situation is different. Why? Because the large organizations no longer are thriving in a business environment where they are knowing what to do. but they have to learn the new processes in the same way as small organizations have to learn. So we are operating essentially in the same boat. If anything, small organizations can be more flexible and can be more agile to adapt to the changes in comparison to the larger organizations. The next part is about collecting multiple snapshots in time of where your organization is today from multiple stakeholders to obtain a realistic assessment of your digital maturity. And this is a very important point because when I talk to business managers and to chief executive officers, in most cases you find that they don't know exactly where they are, or rather they think that they know where they are, but it might be removed from reality. A case in point, for example, I had a client which was involved in the maintenance and repair operation. And when I spoke to senior management, their view was that, oh, we're operating very efficiently, we have specialized functions and processes, and we have specialized teams doing tasks which are highly segmented. But then when you hear the story from the people on the ground, it is a completely different perspective. It was a completely different perspective. Why? Because people were frustrated and alienated about the added complexity involved in implementing a simple process but involving so many people because the tasks were highly fragmented. So the moral of the story here is what you think you are, where you are today, is not actually is not necessarily where you are actually are. So it is very important to take multiple snapshots of where your organization is. Let's look at the technologies of tomorrow. We've spoken about chaos. We've been through several chaotic situations in the last years. We've been through a global pandemic. We have seen, unfortunately, the conflict in Ukraine, and we've seen prices of oil and gas skyrocketing to vertiginous levels, which have impacted significantly different countries, particularly in Europe. These are extreme and extraordinary situations. But on a day-to-day basis, I firmly believe that the single most factor that has an impact on the disruption of the business environment is technology. And I have given some examples there of different technologies of tomorrow which are having a significant impact on business. Very quickly, so if we look at distributed ledger technology, basically, which is the fundamental point on which blockchain has been developed, you can see that there has been a democratization process of the decision making by decentralizing the decisions down the value chain and down to the level of the operation. Why? Because through DLT, we've seen that transaction costs are essentially reduced to a very low level, which makes it feasible to move decisions down the hierarchy. So a case in point, is the supply chain. To the supply chain, for example, you can use either, for example, a very good system for the supply chain that you can use is Ethereum, for example, because Ethereum has a combination of DLT application, but in addition to that, it has smart contract enabling technology, which enables one to assess the decisions that are made at that particular point. And supply chains are very good candidates for distributed ledger technology. Why? Because supply chains typically are made up of different players coming from different sectors. So, for example, let's say, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry, so let's say you are an active pharmaceutical ingredient manufacturer, you have to liaise with your seller or distributor, who is typically at the factory which is producing the medicine. So there is the second part, which is the manufacturer. From the manufacturer, it goes to the distributor, and from the distributor, it goes to the retailer. So each and every one of those components can be a chain in the blockchain, which can be regulated through a very important audit trail that registers all the transactions that are carried out in the process. So this is just a basic example of distributed ledger technology. In the case of artificial intelligence, we've seen the rise of various technological applications, but the most important, I can group them into three. You can look at applications that use machine learning. Machine learning, basically applications are algorithms that are learning to interpret data in a better way as more information is acquired through the system. And this generates important output. And artificial intelligence, we are seeing it in various facets. We're seeing it in ERP solutions, we are seeing it in CRM solutions, and we are seeing it particularly in helping organizations to make more and better, more improved decisions. There is a general misconception that artificial intelligence itself is an application in its own right. It could be an application in its own right, but you can have a traditional technology like ERP or even a financial management system, which has some element of artificial intelligence in place. And we've seen the rise, particularly of fintech organizations, which are maximizing the use of artificial intelligence by offering, for example, robo-advice to clients on how to use the money which is being spent through the transactions that are being processed. We are seeing the application of artificial intelligence in autonomous vehicles in conjunction with other technologies. There are very significantly high levels of applications of artificial intelligence. And I believe that artificial intelligence is one of the most common systems, emerging technologies that will be used in the foreseeable future. Another type of AI system uses what we call natural language processing. Now, what is natural language processing? Natural language processing is basically about interpreting text or speech. And this could be listening and translating speech or text into data, or alternatively, taking data and converting that into text or speech. Or alternatively, it could be a combination of the two, which would lead to a conversation, a system which converses with the human. And that is quite an interesting technology. We've seen this through the emergence of various chatbots, particularly in the customer journey, and this becoming a very important process. There is another branch of artificial intelligence which is quite useful, and this is robotics. Robotics, in comparison to machine learning and NLP, it's movement oriented, and it is either about picking, producing, mixing, or distributing, basically. So it has a lot of implications in terms of machine data that is moving things around to either create new objects or to move them from one place to another. Then we have cloud computing, which I'm sure you've heard, and cloud computing has brought about significant cost savings to most organizations, especially in the context where you have the functionality of sharing and storing data remotely without the necessity of investing in significant hardware to maintain the systems. And it's revolutionizing many organizations. We don't have time, unfortunately, to go into detail, but this is a major revolutionary concept that has given access to small and medium-sized enterprises to very powerful systems to store data securely in a safe environment. IoT is also quite emerging technology, which is very important. And we're seeing IoT basically connecting several devices between them. So you can see the connection between a mobile phone, the laptop, and also a handheld device. But alternatively, it is very important, particularly to collect data, making data acquisition a much cheaper process, which gives us the possibility of interfacing and creating opportunities for analyzing more and more data in a cheap way. So combining Internet of Things with artificial intelligence is a very effective system for collecting information and analyzing it to make the right decisions. The metaverse. It's quite a unique experience. I see my kids playing with Fortnite and Roblox. Unfortunately, I'm not an avid fan of gaming, and I cannot really, I'm not very good at those games, I must admit. But however, the metaverse opens up new opportunities for everyone to do business in the future. We're seeing banks who are making significant investments to be present in the metaverse. We're seeing also potential educational companies providing online courses in a metaverse in a virtual environment. And this is in line with the developments of technologies like augmented reality and virtual reality, which give an improved sensation and feeling of reality in a virtual environment for customers to experience a better customer journey. But there is one important consideration in the metaverse that is different from real life. Whereas the person in real life has a beginning and an end, because at the end of the day, a person dies, your brand identity, the person, the virtual person in the metaverse, can live forever. So really and truly, what we can see in the future is the development of brand personas impersonated by a person, a virtual person who can live on beyond his real life and actually having a brand of its own which outlives his physical life. And this could be something which is quite amazing and it's quite interesting to study in the future. Last but not least, we're seeing the rise of cryptocurrencies and non-fungible tokens. These are also new forms of currency that are being used, but there is one major difference. The cryptocurrencies, one of the issues of cryptocurrencies is that they fluctuate so much that until now it is not a viable currency to be used for payments. It is more used at the moment for speculation and for capital appreciation as opposed to making actual purchases. In the case of non-fungible tokens, we've seen cases of non-fungible tokens that are being used to actually buy pieces of art or land and priceless assets which need extra security. So having gone through what is changing in terms of technologies, let's move through the baseline and how do you assess the baseline? And as I said earlier on, there are two elements that are very important. The first one is to take multiple perspectives, primarily because what you think reality is may not be the truth, because you're seeing it from your own myopic perspective. So it's very important to consult with different stakeholders who have a different perspective in order to arrive to what we call reality calibration, in the sense that by merging different points of view of people together, at one point in time, we will be capable of generating the reality to understand the real situation in which we are at the moment as an organization. But people might not always tell you what they really think. And there are three main reasons why people might not tell you how the digital what is the real state of the digital strategy and how well it is performing. The first instance, it could be ignorance. They might think something, but the reality could be completely different. They might be afraid to tell you the truth because they are afraid of the consequences arising from telling you the truth about the situation. Or alternatively, it could be also greed. They might be holding information back from you because it does not pay them to actually tell you the whole truth. So, and in each of these cases, there are specific ways on how we can deal with each of these elements, which we don't have time, unfortunately, to go into detail. The other part of the process is looking at multiple snapshots. Because why? Because an organization and even the implementation of a digital strategy is not static. It changes all the time. So by basing your assessment on a single snapshot doesn't make sense because that becomes outdated the moment you take it. So it's very important to take multiple snapshots at different points in time to analyze how your organization is changing. And the change can be one of two things. It can either be movement or drift. And these are different concepts, which are different and merit different situations. Drift means that the organization and the digital strategy is moving due to a pull situation. It is not an intentional act, but the organization is actually being swayed away by the external environment in which it is facing. On the other hand, movement means that the organization is controlling where it is uh, moving and making sure that it is going into the right direction. And we have to aspire, obviously, through movement. We can give you an example like Nokia. For example, Nokia had a clear direction in the 1990s to become one of the market leaders in the mobile phone industry. And by 1998, they have become the true market leader in the industry. Beyond that, they have become complacent and they have left the organization to practically operate on autopilot, and it has resulted in drift, whereby they have lost market share and they have been acquired and have disappeared from existence. Establishing your baseline. So this is very important. So once you have identified what type of tools you want to use, I like to use this new model which I have developed, which is called establishing your baseline, which starts off by having four main stages. You've got either is experiment as a start, which means you have to build momentum to make sure that someone starts to operate a digital strategy. If you're not, once you have reached the experiment as a start, you can move forward to concentrate to master a competence, spread to consolidate the whole, or lead by chaos. These are different stages across the digital maturity in order to achieve what you need to do at the end of your digital journey. So a digital journey is not necessarily black or white, it is a staged approach. Strategic agility, this looks at a process basically for making sure that you shape your digital strategy. So first you have to understand your business strategy. You move down to your digital strategy. So you start off from your business strategy. Once you know what is your business strategy, you have to shape your digital strategy, which is aligned to your business strategy. And that has to be modeled on the basis of a digital maturity pathway, which we have seen earlier on. And once you have that digital maturity pathway, you need to instill an agile mentality in your organization. But that is not enough. In order to succeed, you need to become a knowledge-driven organization. Why? Because by managing your knowledge effectively, you can respond to changes in your external environment in a timely manner. Here I'm listing some digital strategy options which I have developed. They are all in my book, but basically there are 8 different positions across 4 different business strategies. And they range from brand leadership, customer experience, network development, digital projects, agile, knowledge organization, green digital, and lean digital. And depending on how you mix these different factors, they can align appropriately with your focus on your business strategy. The next thing you need to do is to align your organization culture to your business model. This is a very important component, and unfortunately, it is poorly understood. And looking at the flow, once you start off from the current business operating model, you need to aspire a vision for the future. So you have an aspiring vision, which is clearly communicated and clearly defines of where you want to go. In terms of people, you need to understand what is the current organization culture. And again, there are various models which we cannot go into here, how to look at the organization culture. And you need to inspire people to shape the vision of the future. So you don't need just to have a proper vision which is clearly defined, but this needs to inspire people. And what I find in practice that the best way to inspire people is to involve them right from the start. And this is a very, very important point. The last part is developing a new business operating model, and that has to be mobilized by managing 2 elements. One are power struggles and modeling the right behavior. It is a very important subject here. When you look at the power, people are incentivized because of different things. And most people think that the incentive is financial, But in true practice, it is about power. Why? Because power is wider and broader in scope in comparison to finance. And power can include knowledge, can include resources, can include authority, formal, and network. So there are different types of powers. But what is important is when you are managing a digital transformation project, you need to understand how each individual stakeholder is going to be impacted by that transformation and identify ways in which to manage that power struggle to minimize the resistance to change. But that not on its own is not enough. You need to get consistency and commitment. And commitment is not generated by reward, but is generated based on trust. And trust is achieved only in situations where the manager not only adopts an open door policy, but he breaks down that door and goes down on the shop floor to manage his people right from the trenches. That is a very important point. People need to see their leader, that leader is trusted in an appropriate manner. And I go into detail even in my book about this factor on how we can establish trust in order to implement that digital transformation project. Finally, have to link technology to critical processes. There are several categories of of technologies, but the most popular and the most common ones, I divide them into three elements. You've got the core processes, the core systems, the backend systems, and the front-end systems. The core systems are primarily focused on the actual operations of the organization. So if it's an insurance company, it's the insurance business system. If it's a manufacturing company, it's the production system, so on and so forth. In the case of backends, typically they are ERPs. So it's about finance, administration, HR, business intelligence, so on and so forth. In the case of front end, we look at basically online platforms, you've got CRM, and you've got the inbound marketing systems. There are different implications from where you start. From my experience, the best way, the best point to start off your transformation is from the core systems. Why? Because from the core systems, in most cases, the backend systems and the front-end systems need a sound foundation in the core in order to work effectively. Also, one final point I'd like to make is that the systems need to link, transcend the cross functions, and need to focus on several critical business processes. This is all from my end. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. Should you have any queries, please do not hesitate in contacting me on my email, which is david.galia@david/galia.com. Thank you very much.